At its peak, the Roman Empire controlled nearly the entire known world. It ruled over vast territories across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. It had the most powerful army on earth. Its cities were rich, organized, and connected by roads that stretched for thousands of miles. For centuries, Rome looked unstoppable. And yet, this unprecedented success created a problem Rome could not solve. The Roman Empire did not collapse because it was weak. It collapsed because its success placed pressures on the empire that its systems were never designed to handle. By the 2nd century AD, Rome had reached the height of its power. Its borders stretched from Britain in the west to the Middle East in the east. More than 60 million people lived under Roman rule. Trade flowed freely across the empire. Grain from Egypt fed Rome's population. Goods moved quickly along an advanced network of roads and port. The Roman army was unmatched. Legions were disciplined, well-equipped, and permanently stationed across the empire to maintain control. From the outside, Rome appeared perfectly stable. Conquest had brought wealth. Expansion had brought prestige. And military dominance had brought security. But beneath this stability, the empire was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The same size and power that made Rome successful were beginning to strain its economy, its army, and its ability to govern. Rome's greatest strength was its ability to expand. For centuries, conquest fueled the empire. Each new territory brought wealth, resources, and prestige. Expansion strengthened the army and reinforced Rome's authority. But as the empire grew larger, expansion began to create new problems. Every new province increased the length of Rome's borders. Those borders had to be defended at all times. As a result, Rome needed more soldiers, not temporarily, but permanently. Legions were stationed across distant frontiers, far from the center of power. This changed how the empire functioned. When threats emerged, response times slowed. Orders had to travel vast distances. Reinforcements could take weeks or even months to arrive. What had once been a flexible, aggressive empire became a system stretched thin. Expansion also exposed Rome to constant pressure. Instead of fighting occasional wars, the empire now faced continuous threats along its borders. This meant that even during times of peace, the army could not be reduced. Military spending became a permanent expense, not a temporary cost. Over time, the size of the empire stopped being an advantage. It became a burden. Rome had built systems designed for growth. But once growth slowed, those same systems began to strain under their own weight. Rome's economy was built to support expansion. Conquest brought in wealth through loot, tribute, and enslaved labor. As long as Rome kept expanding, this system worked. But when expansion slowed, the flow of new wealth slowed with it. At the same time, Rome's expenses kept rising. The empire now had to pay a massive standing army, maintain roads, cities, and fortifications, govern distant provinces year-round. This created a growing imbalance. To cover these costs, taxes increased. Farmers, merchants, and local communities were pushed harder to fund the state. As economic pressure grew, productivity declined. Some land was abandoned. Trade weakened in certain regions. To compensate, Roman authorities began reducing the amount of precious metal in their coins. The coins looked the same, but they were worth less. This led to inflation. Prices rose. Trust in the currency declined. And economic stability weakened across the empire. What had once been a self-sustaining system began relying on short-term fixes. Rome had built an economy designed for constant growth. But once growth stopped, the empire struggled to maintain what it already controlled. Economic stress did not destroy Rome overnight. But it quietly undermined the foundation that supported its power. As economic pressure increased, the Roman army became even more important. Soldiers depended on regular pay, food, and rewards for their service. When the state struggled financially, meeting those expectations became harder. This changed the relationship between the army and the emperor. Loyalty was no longer based only on duty or tradition. It increasingly depended on payment. Emperors who failed to satisfy the army risked losing their support. Those who promised higher pay or rewards gained it. As a result, the army began to play a direct role in politics. Generals with the loyalty of their troops became powerful figures. Some used their armies to pressure the government. Others marched on Rome itself. Emperors were no longer chosen solely by law or succession. Many were made, and removed, by soldiers. This created instability. Short reigns became common. Assassinations increased. Civil wars drained resources and weakened the empire further. For the average soldier, loyalty shifted from the empire to individual commanders. For the state, control over the military began to slip. Rome had once relied on the army to protect its borders. Now, the army was shaping the empire's political future. What began as a defensive necessity became a source of internal instability. As Rome grew larger and more complex, unity became harder to maintain. The empire was no longer a single, cohesive system. Different regions faced different problems, threats, and priorities. What worked in one part of the empire often failed in another. Economic pressure, military instability, and political uncertainty weakened the sense of shared purpose. Local leaders increasingly focused on their own survival rather than the empire as a whole. To manage this strain, Rome divided its administration. The empire was split into eastern and western halves, each with its own leadership and responsibilities. This decision made governance more efficient in the short term. But it also formalized division. The Eastern Empire grew wealthier and more stable. The Western Empire faced heavier military pressure and weaker economic support. Over time, coordination declined. Resources were no longer shared evenly. Loyalty became regional rather than imperial. Rome was still powerful, but it was no longer unified. The empire had expanded faster than its identity could adapt. What had once been a single political body became a collection of interconnected but fragile parts. The fall of the Roman Empire was not caused by a single event. It was the result of pressures that accumulated over centuries. Expansion created borders that could not be easily defended. Economic systems built for growth struggled under constant expense. The army became both protector and political force. And unity weakened as the empire grew too large to function as one. Rome succeeded beyond what its systems were designed to support. Its strength created complexity. Its size created fragility. And its long success delayed the reforms it needed to survive. The Roman Empire was not defeated at its weakest moment. It collapsed after reaching its greatest height. Not because it failed to succeed, but because it succeeded too well.